I love the rain. Good morning, Utah. Boy, it's wet here in wonderful, beautiful downtown Burbank. Or is that bountiful Woods Cross? Being this high up in elevation, I take it that we're at Woods Cross as opposed to being in Burbank. Big difference. You're down by the ocean. But one of the things that I like about rain is that usually where man has been, you can smell where he has constructed things based upon the rain. Now that's going to sound a little weird at first until I say, well, like the pavement. And then you go, oh yeah, when the pavement's dry, and it's just starts to rain the first time on that pavement, then there's that kind of like wet pavement smell that comes up. And some people might not like that, but when you're not raised in the wilderness, like maybe in Alaska or Oregon, and I'll admit there's a big difference in Oregon when it rains. Where I lived in high desert up in the river basin, Klamath Falls, Oregon, when it rains it smells different because if you get out into the woods, there's a lot of hot, dry dirt. And when that rain hits, poof, kind of settles the dust and makes the entire area smell different. Besides that, there's lodgepole pine. That kind of has its own aroma, so to speak, when the rain finally hits it and releases the scent from the nettles or from the needles. And it's beautiful the way that God takes rain and can bless the world with it. It's one thing when we say that God causes the sun to shine and the rain to fall on the wicked and the good, and to just kind of let that go. But one of the things we should be realizing is that when he says he causes this to happen, he causes it as a blessing, not a curse. In other words, the rain that falls isn't a curse just because maybe you live in a precarious area where maybe because of rain, the river you live next to rises and falls. Move! Quit being stupid. Get out of a flood basin. In other words, mankind often fights against the elements. He doesn't work with the area that he lives in. James Michener wrote an interesting book about Hawaii. Was that he wrote about the history of Hawaii and the people that were there, the native culture, as well as when the missionaries arrived. And it was interesting because Michener did his research, and as he typically does, he goes pretty far back into time and brings in a lot of facts and details. And this one detail was about a missionary that had come to, the island of Kauai, and that they had pretty much decided to build this one big church right underneath, you could say, a valley, but they decided to build this church in this beautiful location, and the old-timers told them, no, don't build there. The evil spirits will come and, destroy it. And they said, no, you don't understand. We serve a living God. Our God will beat your God, to death or whatever. And he brought it out, the idea of the old world versus the new world kind of thing, and how the old legends, and the new God and all this kind of modern stuff, So they built the church, and sure enough, when the rainy season came, it took about 2 years, 3 years, then the rainy season came and a flood came down out of the mountains and just tore that building right out by the roots. And the old native, kind of like a sage old-timer, just simply went, well, tried to tell them. And in Alaska you saw that too, where a lot of the older natives, the Inuit or the Inupiat, what you would call Eskimos, they weren't Eskimos, but they're native tribesmen that live in Alaska. There's at least 30 or I think there's 300 different tribes that live in Alaska. People don't realize that they all have different distinctive dialects and languages. And so I remember that living in Alaska, if you met an old timer in the old ways, that he would have, certain things that he did, and then if you asked him, you'd figure out, well, that was a good thing. Well, we in modern technology tend to fight against the elements and try to create some way to be in contradiction rather than in harmony. That's kind of what happens in life with God and with man. There's always this contradiction going on between man and God, where we're either working in harmony with God or we're working disharmonious with what God has done. In other words, we are the problem rather than the solution. And God wants us to be the solution. He wants us to be like the rain that falls upon the heather or the grass, as they say over in England, or some of the ancient poets would write, as dew upon the heather. We're supposed to be refreshing by bringing the excitement and the joy of knowing Jesus and the wonder of having a relationship with God, that we could be attuned to that which God is doing, and reminding those that don't know God that God is alive, simply by the very demonstration of our celebration of life. Now, a lot of people today don't see life as a celebration. They're living a life of mediocrity or meanness. They're living a life of technocracy and technology. They're not into the harmony that can come from not being what a lot of technology people would call a tree hugger, but being a God respecter. A person who says, yeah, it's true. Maybe I shouldn't build my house on the side of a cliff. Just because I pack the dirt down real well, and I lay a good base, with rock and gravel. But, I'm looking at that mountain, but I like the view, so I'll just build a house there anyways, and then a 50-year flood comes and wipes it out, and, you could decide to rebuild there, I guess. But me, I'd probably sell the lot and go somewhere else. But you can argue with God, or you can live with God. Because sooner or later, God is going to win. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you know it or not. The elements such as they are, whether it be wind, earth, fire, flood, rain, tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons, they're going to win, and technology is going to be eliminated, because all of creation groans in travail waiting for the day that the sons of God will be revealed, which is who we are. We're not living according to our nature as long as we're still, kind of like dressed like this and, have all these things that are kind of like contrary to what God has made, but what man has made, trying to imitate being a creator like God is a creator. And so you see that kind of like contrary nature, the contradiction of things that are going on in your life sometimes. If you fight against the system, so to speak, then you find yourself at frustration with the system, don't you? I mean, a lot of people find that out in politics. First they say, well, politics is a wonderful thing, and then they get involved in it and they realize it's not so wonderful. It's a lot of compromise, a lot of, supposedly the idea is, to work out compromise and so that the cooperative good could come of the governed whole by the sovereignty of the nature of people to decide for themselves how they want to live in a society. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's an idea. It's not a practical reality. The practical reality is there's a lot of graft, greed, corruption, people doing their own thing, people wanting to lord it over one another. Like Jesus said, the Gentiles love to lord it over one another. And it's not about servitude or cooperation or the conglomerate whole working together. If anything, people are antagonistic towards social kind of socialisms like that are a part of Christianity. So when you wake up in the day and you look outside and you say, hey, it's raining, you could fight the system that God has put in place, and you could say, I'm going out there as though it were 60-degree weather or 80-degree weather, so I'll wear my shorts, and you'll catch a cold. Or you could cooperate with what God is doing and put on some clothes, kind of put on your rain gear, and if you have to be out in the rain, then you go out in the rain. But you could do something more. You could be maybe like me today, sitting back, sitting still, slowing down, getting a good word from God, and enjoying the rain. See, there's always that opportunity. You can rejoice. You can enjoy. You can employ that with which God has given you, His Spirit, to participate with Him in what the day has prepared for you, or be contrary to it all day long. It's your choice. You get to do technically what you want to do. In everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. I love the Lord, because He has heard my voice and my supplications. Because He hath inclined His ear unto me, therefore will I call upon Him as long as I live. When you pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. But the Spirit helpeth our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought to. But the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. I will, therefore, that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and without doubting, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance, and supplication for all the saints. If two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. You know, it's interesting like that. If I wanted to be contrary, argumentative and debatable, I could fight with God, and say, well, God, I think that we should have sunshine today, and it should always be sunny. And then, I'd probably wind up killing a bunch of the plants, and they wouldn't get the sustenance they need, and I wouldn't smell the wonder of what it smells like right now, of just the chill that's come upon the spring air, and it's just given that slight crispness to the nasal ability to discern between certain scents and certain aromas, certain capabilities that we have in limited function as human beings, but animals have in better supply, especially dogs, as far as their their ability to scent or to smell or to have that capability to make a differentiation between all the different varieties of smell there is out there, and to be able to follow them and to get input from them. It's always interesting to me, because I feel like when we were told, in science, that a great portion of our brain isn't used, I think that someday we will, in the fullness of the millennial kingdom, when Jesus comes and sets up His kingdom, use the full potential of our physical body at that time. And in that time, it'll be like what people say heroin is like. It's always terrible when you have to relate something to something that's, like a drug. But, these heroin addicts say that they have this huge heightened capability or facility to smell, to see, to touch, and everything is like, phew, all the nerves are sharpened, and the intensity of the focalization or the focus is on whatever they happen to be, experiencing at the moment. And it happens to be bad for you, and it's not a good thing, but it does demonstrate something similar to what people go through when they're dying, and they have that same experience when they suddenly discover that they have a short period of time to live, like I did, one time. And yeah, for a long period of time, they have this huge appreciation and capability of seeing things differently, tasting things, hearing things, sensing things, and being very focused in on life itself, and life itself seems to overwhelm them in a wonderful way, that they desire it more, and they're able to connect to those things that we don't, and we do take for granted by our lack of appreciation, it would be said. But when you're in conversation, like we were just told in the Word, when you're in connection with God, when you're praying and talking to God and walking with Him and looking at the things He does and says, and the birds and the air and the rain and just everything that there is about life, then you begin to kind of get into harmony with how slow He is, or how gently He walks, and how appreciative you could be if you would just slow down, take the time, appreciate and talk to your Father. who really wants to show you all that he's made for you today. So today, if you get the chance, try to slow down some. Try to be found some in looking around and maybe hearing, listening, or seeing things from his perspective, as opposed to being a hasty people and a busy people and a running people in your perspective. Personally, I kind of like his perspective. He sees things a lot better than I do.